Oh, it is another episode of 5 Rounds here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. 5 Rounds is served by the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. Make it your spot, including this Saturday, to watch every UFC pay-per-view fight. That includes UFC 265 this Saturday night for zero cover charge. Guys, you pay nothing at the door. Don't trust some of these fly-by-night sports bars that try to make you pay a cover. You will never get that at a classy joint like the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. My God, I love the seafood, man. The buffalo shrimp is my favorite appetizer on the planet. If you eat enough of them, it's really not an appetizer. I can make a meal out of that, believe me. I also love the sushi at the Quarterdeck. I love the new Italian beef sandwich, which Frank Zaffere had me try. It's freaking insane. The jerk chicken sandwich. The beer is ice cold at the Quarterdeck, and the cocktails will cure your ale. So if you want to peep their menu and find the location nearest to you, visit them on the web at quarterdeckrestaurants.com and check us out there, UFC 265 for no cover charge, quarterdeckrestaurants.com. Come for the food, stay for the fun. Alex Donno alongside, as always, my co-host for this evening, Frank Zaffere, who notified me he lost a few Twitter followers because they're purging the porn bots. But follow doing tonight.
No, I'm doing great. Yeah, thank you again for always starting every show with my pathetic Twitter followers. I appreciate that.
And by the way, immediate answer, because Joseph Rodriguez in the live chat said, "Is this live, Donno?" Yeah, it's live. Kryptonite, it's live. Everybody who's in, make sure you smash that like button. Whether you're watching us live right now on YouTube or a replay later on, smash that like button and make sure you subscribe to the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We also have James Walker with us here for five. I was about to say fight night. 5 rounds here.
5 rounds.
James, how are you, man?
I'm doing great. Not excited about this UFC pay-per-view this week, but I'm sure we got a lot of time to talk about why. So let's do it.
Yeah, I think a big reason why we're not as pumped as we were for the last couple of pay-per-views, and Frank, let me start with you because you were very vocal about this on Twitter. This is not anybody's fault. It's certainly not the fault of Amanda Nunes, who had to pull out of this card. It was announced a week ago, tested positive for COVID-19. It's been in her family, so I hope, her kids and her wife are recovering from that and all is good at home. But Amanda Nunes had to pull out of her fight against Juliana Pena. And that was, Frank, that was the real title fight from this card because, Dana White can tell you, oh, we got a belt on the line in the heavyweight division. Bullshit. You have an interim fake belt on the line. And I like the fight in the main event, but you can't call it a title fight when Francis Ngannou continues to exist. Francis Ngannou is the champion. You cannot tell me that Cyril Gane versus Derrick Lewis is a title fight, but I still like the fight. But Frank, how much for you is this card hurt or damaged by losing that female title fight? Because Amanda Nunes is the best female fighter on the planet.
This will shock everybody, right? Because of my known disdain for female mixed martial arts at times. But Amanda Nunes, I would go so far as to say that she might be pound for pound like the best example of a mixed martial arts champion that we have in the league, either gender, today. And we lose her on the card, a true champion, someone that I think cuts through into the casual fan market. She's out. Now we get Jose Aldo, who's officially been fighting 3 years too long, in my opinion, and will not be capturing gold in this latest run. And then we get a fake title fight at the top of the pay-per-view. Gane getting this fight too early, and Derrick Lewis getting this fight for reasons that defy explanation because Francis Ngannou hasn't even been avoiding fighting. I mean, he's available in a reasonable amount of time.
He's 1 month off. Like he just wanted an extra month is all the guy wanted.
Yeah, so all I could tell people is this: don't spend your own money on this. There are bars and restaurants like the Quarterdeck that we got to buy it. So just come on down, let us pay the ticket because this is not one that you want to shell out $70 at home for.
Yeah, James,
I agree. No, I agree wholeheartedly. And, Alex and I talked about this a little earlier. This is a perfect UFC fight night card. If you would ask me to go to the UFC and put together some matchups of, a number one contenders bout, not an interim title fight, a number one contenders bout, a former star in Jose Aldo in the co-main event, that a lot of people at least have name value with, a pretty good fight in Vicente Luque and Michael Chesney. I think that's probably could be fight of the night that hardcore fans will really enjoy. this is a perfect fight night card, but it's an awful pay-per-view card. It's an awful card to pay, $70 for. So I agree with Frank. Go to the quarterdeck, watch it for free. If you're going to spend $70, spend $70 on the menu and at least have a good meal with the fights.
Amen, brother. Amen.
Frank, you laughed at me last week when I said that TJ Dillashaw, Corey Sandhagen card, which was a free TV card, and it was excellent. I said that to me was a pay-per-view caliber card. You laughed at me, but can you at least admit that card from top to bottom probably better than this one looks top to bottom on paper?
Yeah, except a little bit more name value. I mean, James brought up correctly, Chiesa, Luque, that fight there, that's setting up the next fresh contender for Kamaru Usman, in my opinion. So that's a very interesting fight, and both guys have some name recognition. So I think this one is a little bit better, but also agree, also not pay-per-view worthy. I think if we could have taken the Dillashaw card and mashed these two together, we would have had a superb fight night card.
James said the same thing.
Yeah.
Yep, I agree with that. And also hindsight's a little 2020 here because, we've seen the fights on the fight night card. It was the explosive card. Guys really performed. We don't know yet how they're going to perform in the pay-per-view. So to say one is better than the other, maybe on paper right now because we've seen the excitement that the other card produced. But let's see what happens with this one. But yeah, there's more names, but I don't know, man. Some of these matchups, I'm just not even the main event. I don't know if that'll be as exciting a fight as people think.
I want to mention our guests coming up on this episode. We're with you live till 7:30, so we're doing 90 minutes of fight talk this evening. 6:30, MMA coach to the stars, 9-time UFC veteran Din Thomas is going to join us. He was already asking for the link. He's ready to go. He'd probably pop in right now if he wanted to. He's going to join us at 6:30. 7 o'clock, award-winning journalist, does an awesome job covering both mixed martial arts and boxing for Yahoo Sports, and he's been doing that for many years. Kevin Iole is going to join us at 7 o'clock, so we have an absolutely loaded show. But guys, let's talk a little bit more about that main event. And I see that Crypta Knight in the chat, I love the pun, by the way, is a big Derrick Lewis fan, as am I. And listen, for all the crap that we've talked about this fight card and the $70 price tag, I like this fight a lot because I'm also really bullish on Cyril Gane. And I've been a Derrick Lewis fan for years, outside of the time that he fought Francis Ngannou, and he won, but it was one of the most boring fights ever. Derrick Lewis is very exciting. This guy is a finisher. He's going to punish your body. He's going to punish your head. He's going to cut an incredible promo after the fight. I mean, sometimes you have to root for Derrick Lewis to win just because his post-fight interview is going to be more entertaining than the one that his opponent would give. And I know that's going to be the case between he and Cyril Gane this coming Saturday. And it's something that, James and I were talking about a little bit earlier today. Cyril Gane is at least a little bit better at pretty much everything Derrick Lewis is good at, with obviously the kickboxing really being where Gane is a virtuoso. Cyril Gane is, Frank, for as much as I'm kind of expecting him to win this fight, but I say kind of because I never count out Derrick Lewis and I never count out heavyweights because one big punch or one big kick will change the entire complexion of that fight. Still, Cyril Gane, to me, Frank, and I'm looking at the odds at betus.com, the new official sports book of my shows on 5reasonsports.com. And Gane is a bit of a too heavy favorite in my book at minus 350. Like I honestly, Frank, I see some value in Derrick Lewis at plus 250. And if I'm going to put a few dollars on that fight, I'm going to put my money on the Black Beast because I can't find a whole lot of value there at minus 350. You're going to have to put down a lot of money to win anything back. But I'll put down a few dollars on Derrick Lewis. And if he does win that fight, and I think the odds should be a lot closer than they are, you can cash in on Derrick Lewis.
Derrick Lewis started in the UFC not well. And, one of the things he improved on was his cardio, I think. And, he's going to go out there headhunting. And as you point out, Cyril Gane, I mean, look, he's a favorite because he's more athletic. He's just a better athlete. And he's going to have to make this an athletic contest where he's avoiding the mistake of letting Derrick Lewis touch him in the face. Can he do that for 5 rounds? I don't know, but it's worth a wager if you're getting those kind of odds. That's really it, though. Gane's got to make it a boring fight, and Derrick Lewis has got to catch him. And I think Derrick Lewis will be chasing him around the octagon trying to do so.
Yeah, and I agree that there's value in Derrick Lewis, and that's probably the bet in terms of value. But here's why Cyril Gane is favored. Um, he has more versatility in what he's going to do. He's probably going to try to win by points, which is rare in the heavyweight division. Is one of the reasons why I'm not a Gane fan. 3 of his last 4 fights have gone to decision. I don't know many heavyweights that have won 4 fights 4 in a row. That 3 out of the 4 have gone to decision. I would assume it's not that many. But everyone knows what Derrick Lewis is going to do when he comes in. Not only is he limited in terms of, he's mostly a striker, but he's also a limited striker in that he looks for one punch. So everyone knows that coming in. So I think Gane is probably going to have a pretty good game plan put together in how to defend that, how to stop that, how to avoid that, whether it's circling to the left or just using his feet, getting on his bike, trying to win points wise. But there's not a lot of versatility to Derrick Lewis's game where there's going to be any surprises. So I think that's why Gane is probably the heavy favorite because, Lewis is very predictable and there's a predictable path to victory, when that's the case.
Now, could I mention one thing, Alex? I agree with what James just said. I think the one thing, though, and I'm looking forward to asking Din Thomas about this, I don't think Derrick Lewis thinks that Cyril Gane can knock him out. So I think it'll make him more aggressive, and I think that'll be interesting to see if Gane's athleticism can handle that. Because I think Derrick Lewis is going into this fight with no respect for Gane's power whatsoever.
James, let me start with you on this. And actually, I like the point that Crypta makes that Derrick Lewis, he is in his hometown. I don't feel like that necessarily matters as much in MMA. Is it unless maybe you're from Mexico or something? Because when you fight and Brazil, like if you're from Brazil or Mexico and you're fighting in your home country or hometown, that makes a difference. I don't know if Houston, Texas is going to make that much of a difference once they actually step into the octagon. But it is, if nothing else, it's cool for Derrick Lewis because he is a proud Houstonite. Like he donates money to hurricane relief. He's very active charity wise. He's like a big Houston Dynamo MLS soccer fan. I mean, the guy is all in with the city of Houston. So that is a cool thing for him. But this fight is interim title, whatever. It's to crown the next number 1 contender to take on Francis Ngannou. Now, is it fair for me to say, James, I'm actually more interested in seeing Cyril Gane fighting Ngannou than I am seeing Derrick Lewis do it again. I know Derrick Lewis is capable of being very exciting. I know, obviously, Francis Ngannou is capable of being extremely exciting, yet still, they fought before, so we've seen that already. For whatever fluky reasons, I think a lot of it had to do with Francis Ngannou's mental state coming off his loss to Stipe. I just don't think he was right, and he was very tentative. But their first fight was coma-inducing. Like, it was one of the worst heavyweight fights I have ever seen in my entire life. With Cyril Gane, there's a clear angle here, okay? This is a fresh contender. This is, a countryman of Ngannou from France. They've trained together before. So you have so many storylines to sell this fight, and it's a fight we've never seen before. I know Dana White can't openly play favorites, or at least he shouldn't. And it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if we see Derrick Lewis fighting Ngannou again, because I do think the second fight would be better than the first. It has to be better than the first. But still, I'm a lot more interested in the fresh contender with the saucy storylines in Cyril Gane taking on Ngannou next.
Yeah, and I agree. And he would be an undefeated fighter. And I think when you have, an undefeated fighter going against Francis Ngannou, who's looks like an irresistible force right now, I think you kind of have a little intrigue with that because Ngannou right now just looks unbeatable. He just does, especially if he's a patient Francis Ngannou like he's been, like he was in his last fight against Stipe. So you have Gane who would be undefeated, have a win over Derrick Lewis, beat Volkov and some guys coming up. So I think you could sell it. I don't think he really stands much of a chance against Ngannou, especially with him, trying to do points fighting and stuff like that. Not going to work, in that respect. But I think the UFC would have a better sell than a rematch between Derrick Lewis and Ngannou. Really, let's be honest. Everybody's waiting for Jon Jones versus Ngannou. Let's be honest with it. But go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. I mean, I just want Dana White to pony up the money and get Jon Jones in there for Francis Ngannou. I don't want to see Ngannou fight either one of these guys, honestly. Or at least not first. I honestly think he should fight Jon Jones, and I think he should fight Stipe. I think Stipe deserves a third fight. I mean, how much does the UFC hate their longest reigning heavyweight champion in Stipe Miocic that the guy can't sniff? a third shot at Ngannou. So I'd like to see Jones. I'd like to see Stipe, however you say his last name. I've heard it pronounced 3 different ways. I'm going to use multiple versions. Miocic, and then Gane or Lewis. Because I think Lewis is going to win personally, and so I don't know how excited I am to watch that coma-inducing fight again.
And Frank, I want to pick up on something that you guys were saying, that Ngannou, and obviously when you fight at that weight class, I think there's a reason why there's only been one guy in UFC history to defend the heavyweight title more than twice consecutively, and that's Stipe Miocic. But there's a reason why it's so hard to defend that belt, is no matter how good you are, how good you think you are, for grown men of that size, you land a couple of punches. Even the best can be beaten in that weight class on any given night. Yet still, I agree with what you guys are saying, that Francis Ngannou, the Predator, is really molding himself into what looks like a damn near perfect mixed martial arts fighter. Because when he was first coming up and knocking people's heads into the third row, you had legitimate question marks about his wrestling and lack of takedown defense, which absolutely got exposed in his first fight against Stipe Miocic, and his cardio got exposed as well. But it's hard to maintain your cardio when you're getting taken down and grinded over and over again. Even the best could lose their cardio in that sort of a situation. And since then, he has answered those questions, and he clearly has shored up any weaknesses he had in defending takedowns. And the performance that he put in the rematch against Stipe, I'm watching that fight and I'm thinking, who's going to beat this guy? Like, who is ever going to beat this guy? He might be like Ivan Drago, the most perfect heavyweight specimen.
Alex, don't jinx him. I mean, think about the evolution in the heavyweight division that we've seen. I really thought Junior Dos Santos was the long-reigning future of the division. His athleticism, his versatility on the ground and in striking. And look how short that show lasted. And then we get Cain Velasquez. And then I'm like, that's it.
That was my guy.
Going away.
Yeah.
And then injury destroyed him. Yeah. And so I don't know. This might be controversial, but I think that the person who could really be a long-standing heavyweight champion is Jon Bones Jones. I think if he would step in and really commit to the division, his skill set is unparalleled. I mean, it truly is unparalleled.
I don't know if he beats Francis, though.
No, I don't think he beats Francis either.
I don't think he beats Francis.
I think that would be his toughest matchup because of the punching power.
I'm trying to think of the last time I saw Jon Jones lose. Oh, wait.
Never. Well, Matt Hamill, disqualification, bro.
Technical DQ.
DQ. 12-6 elbows.
I mean, that's what's so exciting about him going to that division, right? Because, I mean, you can't imagine him losing, but you could imagine him losing to Francis Ngannou.
The thing that worries me most about Jones at heavyweight is he wasn't really a finisher in terms of punching power anyway. Punching power kind of finisher in light heavyweight. So he definitely wouldn't win on punches, as far as really have any punching power advantage at the heavyweight division with pretty much any opponent he faced. Now, Jones is a smart enough fighter, versatile enough fighter to get around that. But, man, I just think Ngannou is a tough matchup. But would he fight a warm-up fight? That's the thing. He put on Twitter recently, hashtag champion in 2022. So he's already looking towards next year. He's already has his eyes on a title fight next year. But does that mean he'll fight in July? Does that mean he'll fight next December? Does that mean he'll fight next January? I think Jon Jones and Stipe would be a great matchup, that would make a lot of money for the UFC, probably make a decent amount of money for Jon Jones, but probably not enough money, without the belt. But should he risk it all and just put all the chips on the table for the heavyweight title first, or should he do a warm-up fight?
Well, let me give you my final thoughts on Ngannou, then I'll talk about Jones a little bit. Everything he touches, he destroys. That's Francis Ngannou. But on Jon Jones, I would, and he's now represented by a very smart man in Steven Espinoza, and I like he recently left first round management. I'm a big fan of Mckee. I think he's done a nice job with the sport. But Jones, if I'm Steven Espinoza, I'm Jones' representation. I am strongly advising him against taking any tune-up fight at heavyweight. It's just too much of a risk. At any weight class, it's too much of a risk. At that weight class, against a guy like Stipe, who's so comfortable fighting there and is the longest reigning champion in UFC history, I throw a lot of disrespect at Stipe Miocic, whatever you want to call him. I throw a lot of disrespect at that guy only because I think he has the personality of a brick wall. That's the only reason why I throw disrespect at Stipe. I have the utmost respect for him as a fighter. Now, I think that he clearly passed the torch to Francis Ngannou. But if you were to tell me we're going to line up Stipe against Jon Jones, and it's Jones's first foray into the heavyweight division, I'm not feeling comfortable if I'm Johnny Bones Jones, and I'm risking the biggest fight in UFC history. Like if I say, hey, I'm going to take this fight against Stipe, and then I'm one win away from the biggest money fight against UFC history, I don't want to risk it against a guy like Stipe. Honestly, I don't want to risk it against anybody. I mean, if I'm Steven Espinosa, who has a good relationship with Dana White, they've been buddy ever since they both made like $1 trillion. You know, when they made Floyd Mayweather versus Conor McGregor, they're like, man, we scammed all these people. We charged $100. We charged $100 a pop for this fight, and we set pay-per-view records. So Steven Espinosa and Dana White are bosom buddies for life. And if I'm Steven, I tell Dana White, sir, it's heavyweight title fight. It's Francis Ngannou or bust. I am not interested in Jon risking that fight against anyone on your heavyweight roster.
Alex, it was a great reference to the Mayweather-McGregor fight, right? Because, McGregor, had he taken some kind of tune-up fight in boxing, would have taken all the sting out of that Mayweather potential fight because, he would have been exposed early. But more importantly, Jon Jones is Jon Jones, guys. It's Jon Jones. He's undefeated, legitimately. Undefeated. Yep. He's been reigning terror over what was the most feared division in the UFC for forever, and he decimated the roster. I mean, have you read? I mean, I know James was looking earlier. Have you read the rankings? I mean, they got Glover Teixeira is the guy. He's older than I am. I mean, he destroyed that division. He laid waste to that division, and now if he steps into heavyweight, he says who he fights. He's the king.
Yeah. Last point I want to make about that, Alex. I thought you mentioned something very interesting about putting Jon Jones risking that fight. The longer they wait, the more they risk on Francis Ngannou's side as well. Let's say Francis Ngannou fights the winner of this fight, Derrick Lewis and Cyril Gane. And let's say Derrick Lewis has one punch and connects, right on Francis Ngannou's chin. And now that fight's over, and Jon Jones isn't making nearly as much money fighting anybody else, whether it's Derrick Lewis or Cyril Gane or whomever, for the heavyweight title. So the longer they wait, the more risk there is on both sides. Go ahead, Frank.
No, I was just going to ask you, James. I go back and forth on that. On the one hand, I agree with you. On the other hand, I wonder if Jones' management kind of wants Ngannou to slip up. I can't quite figure it out because he's the most terrifying force in that division. Maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Maybe they just want to fight for the heavyweight title no matter who it's against. Just not Stipe because he's boring.
Yeah, I mean, it probably would be in Jon Jones' best interest to fight anyone else other than Ngannou. But if he wants to make the most money, he has to fight Ngannou. So it's a double-edged sword. The money or the title,
Right.
By the way, I want to get into, and we're about 7 minutes away from being joined by Din Thomas, MMA coach to the stars, 9-time UFC veteran, reality TV show star. If I was going to give out his whole resume, we'd be here all night. But before Din hops in, James sent us in a group chat earlier today. This is pretty interesting, and I haven't looked at this one in a while. Like, every now and then I will go on to UFC.com and I'll check out the fighter rankings in various weight classes. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was all over the bantamweight rankings because that fight night card 2 weeks ago had like 4 men's bantamweight fights on it. So there were a lot of pivotal fights to that division. I hadn't looked at top pound for pound in a while. And I want, maybe Kevin Iole can verify this for us, or maybe someone in the live chat. Make sure you hit us up in the live chat, because we think that they recently changed the number 1 pound for pound guy, curiously, because he hasn't fought in forever. And the number 2 guy has been very active and very dominant. But, the UFC's top pound for pound rankings, this is no weight class. This is just pound for pound. They've got Jon Bones Jones currently ranked now top pound for pound. Kamaru Usman is 2nd. Israel Adesanya 3rd. Volkanovski 4th. Ngannou 5th. Might be a little bit disrespectful to the Predator there. Dustin Poirier 6th, Jan Blachowicz 7th, Stipe 8, Holloway 9, Oliveira 10, Brandon Moreno 11, Robert Whittaker 12, Piotr Jan 13, Gaethje 14, Aljamain Sterling 15. But if they did recently flip around the number 1 and number 2 spots pound for pound, James. Like I wonder if I don't know if that might have anything to do with, kind of starting to set the table for promoting a potential Jones comeback or Jones versus Ngannou fight, because I don't know why you would downgrade Kamaru Usman, because this guy fights every few months and he destroys people.
Kamaru Usman's on his way to fighter of the year. And if he wins this Colby Covington fight, I think it's a lock. He's far and away any of the competition for fighter of the year. And he has another big matchup. He would have a chance to go 3-0 and pretty much all 3 title fights in this division and attempt to clean out the division. So to me, Kamaru Usman right now, today, is the number 1 pound for pound fighter, fighter. Now, here's the debate. How do you do the rankings? Are you saying the best fighter in the world right now? Because I think that's where you can say history says Jon Jones. He's never lost. He's cleaned out his division twice. He's done things that a lot of people, no one really has done, at light heavyweight. But in my estimation, I think activity counts for something. It's not the end all be all with pound for pound rankings, but I think you need to be active. And I think that really goes with all rankings in all divisions. You can't take a year plus off, like Jon Jones has done. It's going to be probably 2 years by the time he actually gets back in the octagon and still be the number 1 pound for pound fighter in the world. That's the problem that I have with it. Nothing against Jon Jones, but to me, I think activity counts for something. And if you want to kind of break it down even more finite, pound for pound, Jon Jones is moving up to heavyweight. He's gained a few pounds, so he's even gotten bigger. I think that kind of goes against him when you talk pound for pound rankings, right? Yeah. That's why Ngannou's number 5. Ngannou could probably run through everybody on that list if you put him in the octagon against everybody on that list. So I think there's reasons for that. That Kamaru Usman should be number 1. Jones probably top 3 right now, but unless you say who's the best fighter in the world, that's the only way I could see Jon Jones being number 1 at this point.
But let me interrupt real quick before Frank gets in. I love some of the comments coming in. I totally agree with Alex M, who says Islam Makhachev is better than Justin Gaethje. I agree. The problem is when you do these pound for pound rankings, a lot of it goes into resume politics, right? Like if you were to tell me, hey, Islam Makhachev is fighting Justin Gaethje tomorrow night, I am betting my freaking mortgage on Islam Makhachev. Like I'm saying, that's a W, bro. I love Gaethje, but I'm sorry. That is an Islam W. But, they still, Frank, they consider things, like resume and longevity and, who's been closer to championships and stuff. There's politics in it. And C. Dola is asking, where is Masvidal? I don't think Masvidal is top 15 pound for pound worthy. He is ranked number, I think, 7 in the UFC welterweight rankings, but he does not. Yeah, exactly. Number 7 in welterweight, but he rightfully does not crack pound for pound because he's got too many recent losses.
When I look at the list from time to time, I never quite understand what methodology they're using to put it together. The one I would want to use, if I had any input on it, is just to look at each fighter as a representation of mixed martial arts, and then imagine them, once you get a list of who you think are the best across divisions. Obviously, they can't fight each other, but imagine if you could change their weight miraculously and move them into divisions where they could face each other. And that's where I get Jon Jones, clearly the number 1 guy. I take Jon Jones and I turn him into a featherweight. There's no one in that division that can beat his skill set. I think he's the best representation of mixed martial arts among male fighters that we have today. And that's why I don't have a problem with him supplanting Kamaru Usman, who, by the way, I have huge respect for. I think he may very quickly erase our memory of George St. Pierre, the kind of the dominance he's having, but he's not as well-rounded a fighter as Jon Jones. He just isn't, so that's how I try to do it. That's how I try to think about it. That's why Alex is absolutely right. Like Justin Gaethje does not belong on that list. His skill set is not impressive in the way that Kamaru or Jon Jones or other fighters on that list skill sets are impressive.
Oh, and by the way, to Alex, he's asking where's Amanda Nunes on the list. Unfortunately, the list is gender biased. It's segregated. They've got a men's.
It's a great, It would be Amanda, in my opinion, though, if they were blended together.
But you know what? Like, and she is number 1 women's pound for pound, of course. Like, why don't they blend it? Because it's not like you expect people on the pound for pound list to fight each other anyway.
Right.
So like, what's the point of segregating? Because it's not like any of us are ever expecting Piotr Jan to fight Jon Jones. So like, if you're just going to do pound for pound, I think that should be male and female.
If I turned Amanda Nunes into changed her gender and then made her into a heavyweight, she would be the reigning heavyweight champion, right? I mean, that her skill set is bar none the most impressive I've ever seen.
That's a good point. I think you have to put Valentina Shevchenko probably in that top 15 as well. And just in terms of dominance and maybe dominance overall, kind of counts. When you talk about the people we're talking about, the Usmans, the Jon Jones, the Amanda Nunes, the Shevchenkos, they are dominating their opponents in championship fights, at the highest level. So I think that has something to do with it as well.
If you were going to allow, do like one mashed up pound for pound list, men and women, would you do Amanda Nunes number one, period? Because I honestly think I might. Like and I know part of that is like, okay, she's dominant relative to there's no other woman that can beat her. And the women's divisions are not quite as stacked as the men's divisions, but still, I think if you were going to combine men's and women's top pound for pound, she'd be my number one.
Yeah, that's a tough call. I mean, if you look at the dominance between her and her opponents, I mean, I think you have a strong case for that. I mean, Jones, Usman, Nunes. I think that would probably be my top three in no particular order. I think you can make a case for all three really at this point.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, I already said it, so I agree. And I think Valentina Shevchenko, I think, also has to figure into that mix too. I apologize to her for not remembering, but she's the only one that's ever pushed Amanda that I can remember.
Yeah. When are they going to make that fight happen, by the way? That seems like a no-brainer fight, and they're waiting on that one as well. I guess they're both champs, so maybe it's not time to pull the trigger on that one yet.
Yeah, and also, like, I don't really think either of them are in danger of slipping up anytime soon, right? So you can probably pretty safely let them wait. I know in probably any minute or two, we're expecting to hear from Din Thomas. I was just checking to see if he was on the horn yet. He's not on the horn just yet. So something. I like that. Number one, I think I might flop number one and number two though, or flip them. He's got Alex M has Jones number one, Nunes 2, Usman 3, Shevchenko 4. I like the fact he's given a lot of deserved love to the women, but I might even put Nunes at number one, man, But
I wouldn't argue with it. It's splitting hairs with 1-2 for me. I mean, if it was Jones, I wouldn't have a problem with that. And by the way, when are they going to let the media do the rankings? When will that happen? Or can the media just put out their own version of it?
Weren't they doing that, or are they? I mean, it's a very select group of media. Like you basically have to be a media member who has never talked badly about the UFC before, which eliminates 99% of the MMA media. It basically eliminates everyone but John Anik. Like he's probably the guy.
I think ESPN and CBS Sports does their own, but no one really pays much attention to because really, I mean, when the UFC promotes their fights and decides who fights who. They go by their own rankings, so it really all the other stuff doesn't really matter in the general UFC space.
I mean, I always lose sight of the fact that this really is like boxing and entertainment business, where they have to create and sometimes manufacture the hype necessary to sell a card. So for that reason, I don't think they'll let go of that ranking system anytime soon.
And to Alex M is asking, he's saying Dustin Poirier belongs in the pound for pound. He is in there, I think. Yeah, he's very high. He's number 6. He's very high on the list. Yeah. So I think
we got Din Thomas. I think he's in the stable.
Oh, here we go. Oh, Din Thomas is in the suite, ready to be brought on the virtual suite. MMA coach of champions, coach of the stars, 9-time UFC veteran, radio star in Palm Beach, reality TV show star. Din freaking Thomas is with us. Din, good evening, sir. How are you?
What's going on, man? Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Great.
Are you in South Florida or are you jet setting somewhere this week?
No, I'm in South Florida for the next few hours, and then I'm headed to Houston to work the fight. So I'm excited.
Now, let me ask you about a fight that was unfortunately pulled from this card. Of course, you know Amanda Nunes very well, and it was obviously really disappointing, and even more so than the fight, just from a personal level, to hear that she had to be pulled from the card due to COVID. Have you heard anything from her and how her family is doing? Because I know that they were going through it, man. Hear anything about that?
Well, no, like when it first happened, I reached out to them just to make sure they were okay, and I got a thumbs up from them. So, like, from the last time I heard from them, they were okay. I haven't heard anything since, but I do know that this variant of the COVID has been just kind of tearing through people.
Yeah.
So I may have to reach out to them again to make sure that they're doing all right.
Hey, Dean, help me understand Cyril Gane, because man, I've watched 3 or 4 of his fights. I just don't get it. I don't understand. 3 out of 4 fights have gone by decision in that heavyweight division where they mostly bang. He seemed more like a points fighter, a guy that will get on his bike. Help me understand where his strengths are and why he's so successful at heavyweight.
Well, I think he's a great fighter. I mean, he can do it all. And while it may not be as entertaining and as electrifying those fights that he had that were kind of, a bit lackluster, I think that's the strength that he's going to need in order to beat Derrick Lewis this weekend, because he's going to need to be patient. He can't make mistakes. He can't go out there and get caught. I mean, that's the biggest thing for him. He's the heavy favorite because of his skill set. But the one thing that Derrick Lewis does so good is he gets people out of their skill set and makes them make mistakes. But we've seen that Cyril Gane can fight a patient fight and fight a mature fight and not make mistakes and make it boring. He's going to need that to beat Derrick Lewis, because he can't show that, come out and start making mistakes and be wild and crazy like other heavyweights that the same thing that kind of wows us and puts us in awe. He's got to do the opposite against Derrick Lewis.
Hey, Dean, you live in that special world that we only dream about. You rub shoulders with Dana White all the time. Can you please tell me, can you please explain to me how much they must dislike Stipe Miocic? Because Cyril Gane, for all his talent, he got 10 fights and he's already fighting for the interim heavyweight title. And meanwhile, Stipe's sitting there going, when do I get a shot again? Why am I being left out?
Well, I'm gonna tell you like this, Frank. It's never really personal with Dana. There's got to be something in the numbers.
Yeah,
got to be something in the numbers that suggests that Stipe is a underperforming champion in terms of the numbers. And there's something that maybe Cyril Gane is younger and has a brighter future and they can get more out of him. There's got to be something in the numbers, because it's never anything personal that they're looking at him, because I'm sure they love him as a person, but it's got to be something in the numbers that suggests that, listen, he just doesn't do it on pay-per-view. So we got to have somebody else that can do it.
Now, we know whoever wins the fight this weekend is presumably going to get Ngannou next, right? They're going to be the interim champ and the #1 contender. Which do you think, if we're talking about the numbers, what do you think, Dean, is the more sellable fight? Because Derrick Lewis has got more of a personality, but since we've seen him fight Francis before, the first fight was terrible. I'm sure the second fight would be better, but Gane is a fresh contender. He's got the angle of, being French and having trained with Ngannou before. So I can see, the people who make those embedded episodes and the countdown episodes will have a lot to work with if Cyril Gane gets the nod. Do you think Cyril Gane versus Francis would be the fight that's a little bit better for business?
I wouldn't say better, but I would say this, is that the UFC is not stupid, and they always put themselves in a win-win situation. And this is no different. If Derrick Lewis wins that fight, it's a big fight, because Derrick Lewis is Derrick Lewis. You can sell a guy who's knocked out more people than anybody in the history of the UFC. If Cyril Gane wins, there's a storyline behind that, because Cyril Gane trains with the guy who brought up Francis Ngannou. So there's a storyline behind that. So I think the UFC, they always put themselves in a position where it doesn't matter who wins, they got something to work with. And I think that's the case in this too.
Now, Dean, my main event on this card, my personal main event, is the Vicente Luque against Michael Chiesa. I'm really looking forward to that fight. Break that down for me, because both fighters are really hot. I think Chiesa's on a 4-fight winning streak, and Luke's won 9 out of 10. So break that down. Break that down for me.
Well, the thing is with that fight is it's a matter of who imposes their will, and that's obviously with every fight. But I mean, they're so strong at their offenses that this really comes down to that, because if one of them gets sucked into the other one's game, I mean, it's just a wrap. However, Luque, he's so dangerous on his feet. And Michael Chiesa knows that. He knows he can't play that game with him. He's going to have to be in and out, but mostly in. He's such a long fighter that if he ties Luque up, Luque won't be able to get away from him. Because I think because Luque is not the best athlete. He's a tough SOB, but he's not the best athlete. So if he gets tied up, he won't be able to just explode out. So I think Michael Chiesa is going to have to try to tie him up, use his length on the inside, and just make sure that Luque can't get away from him. Just really do a good job of being a an octopus on him once he ties him up. However, if Luque can keep some space and start throwing some punches, or maybe from the outside beat up Michael Chiesa's legs to slow down his mobility, that can be a problem for Chiesa, because Luque, you can barely hurt the guy with a punch. I mean, his head is like a can of yams. But the way he moves, but the devastation that he has when he connects on people is just, the numbers show it. It speaks for itself. I mean, he hurts people when he hits them. And Chiesa's not the type of guy who's going to be able to bounce back after getting pummeled for a while. So, honestly, I'm favoring Chiesa in the fight just based on how smart he is and how much I know he's not willing to engage with a guy like Luque, and he's going to fight a smart fight. It won't be exciting, but I'm leaning towards him in this fight.
Hey, Dean, a long time ago, you were on the show with Alex and I on 560, and we talked about the Brazilian fighters and how they had a history training down there, training too hard, not training smart, and kind of burning themselves out. Jose Aldo's on this card. He's trying to make another run, probably his final run. I had argued earlier in the show that he's probably been fighting a little too long and there's really no shot. Do you see a shot for him moving forward? Because this is his really big opportunity, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is a chance. For sure. If he's going to make a run, he's got to start it now, because, he's a guy who, while he's, and I didn't notice it there, I think they're like 2 days apart in age, but Jose Aldo is older than I am in terms of fight years. Like he's the godfather of MMA because he's so old. But surprisingly, I think he's still on borrowed time, and he's looked good in his last couple of fights, regardless of whether he won or not. He looked like he still had something to give. However, I don't know how much he has to give, and I think he's lucky that this fight is a 3 rounds. I think I don't know if he would do well again in 5 rounds against a guy with the pressure of Pedro Munoz, but he's still dangerous. That's one thing you can never take away from him. He's still dangerous, and I think sometimes Pedro is a little irresponsible with the way he holds his head when he's throwing punches. Aldo can capitalize off of that. If he doesn't, he's done, because Pedro will eat him up.
Dean, somebody that Frank, James, and I hadn't had a chance to talk about yet on this episode, I want your take, is AJ Mckee. I mean, he really won an impressive fight against Patricio Pitbull, hurt him twice, got the guillotine finish. And Mckee, he looks like the real deal to me, man. I mean, I remember watching his dad, back in the day, Antonio, and AJ. He's 18-0 now. All of his fights have been in Bellator, and I expect Bellator is going to do whatever they can to hold on to him. Showtime as well. He's a valuable asset for them. But if we can talk hypothetical, because a lot of times, Dean, people have this UFC bias. And if you've got a great, successful fighter elsewhere, they may get downplayed by some fans because, hey, they're not fighting the best of the best. And people wonder, well, would he really be would Mckee really be, having success against the likes of Volkanovski and Holloway and Ortega, the way that he's having success against the likes of Pitbull. So how do you think AJ Mckee would do? Because maybe one day we'll see him in the UFC. How do you think he stacks up with the best of the best at featherweight?
Man, I'll tell you like this, man. I've known that family for a long time. Like, I've ducked to his father, Antonio Mckee, for years when he was fighting and competing. I was like, I'm never fighting that guy, because, and here's the irony in that family, is that Antonio Mckee was the most boring fighter ever. He was like, I never want to fight this guy. He's just going to lay on top of you. But his son is the most electrifying fighter ever. So it's like, it's a really weird thing, but he's always been high on his son. He's always been talking about how good his son is. And there's been rumors about how his son just beats everybody up in the gym. And at times you start to question it. I was like, man, is this true? Is this true? But he's 18-0, and he's destroyed everybody that he's fought. So you have no choice but to believe the hype around AJ Mckee. I believe it. I'm sold on AJ Mckee. Now, with that being said, there are other factors with him fighting in the UFC that can destroy the myth. And that is fighting in the UFC. When guys get to the UFC, it's a different level. It's not the small league. And Bellator, for as good as it looks on TV or whatever, and high as it is, when you go to a Bellator event, it feels like a regional show. You can perform on regional shows. When you go to the UFC, it feels like the Super Bowl. Can he perform in the Super Bowl? That's the question. I don't know. I know he can compete with guys like Max Holloway and Volkanovski in terms of skill for skill, but can he compete on the level of the UFC on that stage? And that's what shakes people up. I think that's what really shook up Michael Chandler when he fought Oliveira, is him competing on that stage in front of that crowd. I think that was the difference.
Now, when we're talking about hypotheticals and what ifs, here was a guy, not in your weight class, but a guy who fought in your era and is still fighting, never came over to the UFC, Fedor Emelianenko. Now, I'm not talking about Fedor right now at 44 years old, but like Fedor 15 years ago, and then, up until maybe a decade ago, about around the last time that he and the UFC were kind of negotiating and it never happened. How do you think Fedor would have done like in those eras of the UFC heavyweight division? Because he was always linked to potential fights against people like Randy Couture, Brock Lesnar, Frank Mir, guys that he never got to fight in Pride. How do you think Fedor would have done if he ever came over?
At that time in Fedor's prime, in his prime, he would have busted those guys up.
I agree.
Fedor would have busted those guys up in his prime. Like Fedor in his prime was the best heavyweight of all time. Now, if you were to take that same Fedor now and put him in the game today, skill sets are different. The game is different. I don't think Fedor would do very well. But in his prime, relatively speaking, in his prime, he would have busted all those guys up.
Hey, Dean, I want to switch to last week. First of all, I saw you on the post-fight desk. I really enjoyed it. The suit was really cool.
The bow tie? Yeah.
Yeah, man, that was cool.
Yeah.
I asked a question on Twitter, which nobody saw because I have no followers. But I was very
a few porn bots saw it.
I was really looking forward to asking you. Uriah Hall, Uriah Hall got busted up, and is he the most overrated or maybe disappointing talent that's ever hit the UFC? Because he was so electrifying in The Ultimate Fighter, and then what happened? I mean, it's just what's happened with this guy.
Fighting ain't for everybody, man, and that's the thing that we all have to understand is that there's there's a lot of guys that fight that don't like fighting. They only fight because they're good at it. And I think Uriah Hall is one of those guys. And it's just not for everybody. It's like public speaking ain't for everybody. Things aren't for everybody. And just because you see them out there doing it, like sometimes we vicariously live through them or we put these expectations on these guys and they try to convince themselves that it's for them. Like hearing Uriah Hall talk prior to that fight, the pre-fight talk, to me it sounded like he was trying to convince himself that he was a fighter. And he's not a fighter. He's a guy that fights and he's very good at it when he's on. But Sean Strickland is the fighter. Sean Strickland when you want a guy who's going to be really good at fighting, find a guy who will fight you in a parking lot, and then teach him how to fight really good. Those are the guys that you really want, because those are the guys that are going to fight to the highest level of potential on fight night. But when you get guys that are kind of like, oh, I don't really like this, I just like to train, and because I'm good at it, I can make some money doing this. You don't know the type of performance. This is why I don't bet on fights, because I never know what I'm going to get out of a guy.
Dean, does Sean Strickland like fighting a little too much? Because I hear those quotes after the fight where he says, I would love nothing more than to kill someone in the ring. It's like, whenever I see that, I'm like, man, this sounds a lot like, in the 90s when John McCain used to call it human cockfighting. I mean, is that like a common attitude for people?
No, I think he was just saying that. I think he was I think that's kind of hyperbole. Yeah. But I also think Sean Strickland does have, a lot of mental issues, and like a lot of other fighters, they've got into this because it was an outlet for them to rage, and they may not like themselves very much, and he's projecting that onto what he wants to do inside the cage because they really don't like themselves much. A lot of people get in there and they go into fights thinking, man, I'm going to die today because I don't like myself, so I'm going to fight my hardest. And then they give you these performances and we cheer them on. I mean, it's really the whole mental health issue and mental illness issue that we talk about often with MMA or other sports, but I think it's rampant in MMA because of the nature of the sport. Like, you're really going out there to do damage and hurt other people, and we applaud that. But we have to be careful because it's really a dangerous line that we're playing with.
Yeah, Dean, you just made me realize that Michael Bisping was actually really disrespectful then to call him insane. I think he said it 3 or 4 times.
He did, yeah.
The way you just phrased that was really illuminating, because I think you're probably right. I think there's some things that are not quite right with Sean Strickland.
Oh, of course, man. I know. I mean, to be honest with you, I know a lot of fighters that are suffering from the injury or suffering from a lot of mental illness. They have a lot of trauma that they're dealing with, but we dismiss it because they're fighters and think that, oh man, whatever, this outlet is good for them, and sometimes it is, but they still need to address those issues. And I think and again, like, we look at him and we go, oh man, he's crazy, he's insane. Hey, he is, but that's not a thing we should applaud. This man needs help. Right. While he's fighting and has this outlet to channel that energy, he still needs help to deal with his issues to make him a more healthy individual mentally.
Well, this is really good stuff, man. Illuminating stuff from Din Thomas.
Very
and Din,
much.
you mentioned you're on your way to Houston tonight. What are you going to be working on out there? We're going to see you on the pre-fight, post-fight. Where can we find Din Thomas this weekend?
Oh, I'm doing the coaching analysis, so they'll throw to me every couple of fights, and
I love that,
and see what I see.
I love that. That's really good stuff. So yeah, if you guys are, and I would assume everybody watching this is going to be watching UFC 265. So you will see and hear from Din Thomas at that event. Din, thank you so much, man. Safe travels to you.
All right, gentlemen. I appreciate you guys. One love.
Likewise.
One love. I love that, man. Yeah. And in about 9 minutes, Kevin Iole from Yahoo Sports is going to join us. Guys, I'll start with you, Frank. I want to get into a little bit. We talked about it with Din. Sean Strickland's victory over Uriah Hall. And I do want to get to, Frank, your angle about Uriah Hall being like one of the more overhyped prospects, 8-9 years ago, whatever it was that he was coming up. But this was an absolute lopsided performance for Strickland. I expected Strickland to finish the fight, yet I still thought he was more dominant than I expected, because that was a 5-round ass beating, and he came close in a few different rounds to finishing that fight. I think there was at least one 10-8 round in there. One of the judges did score it that way. Two of the judges didn't, because these judges don't know how to consistently handle 10-8 rounds. But Strickland, I thought, and I know he's big, but I was actually a little bit surprised by how much bigger and longer he was than Uriah Hall. I wasn't expecting there to be that much disparity till I actually saw them. And Uriah Hall, in 5 rounds, never figured out the distance. Like, he never figured out how to get inside. Strickland was touching him up and busting him up with his jabs, and was landing a lot of straight punches and heavy punches as well. He was landing kicks. He was, going for takedowns and submissions. He was doing everything he wanted to in that fight. I wasn't expecting that much of a rout, right? I was expecting Strickland to win, Frank, but I thought that was about as close to a flawless performance as you could have without actually finishing your opponent.
Yeah, I didn't expect it to be that one-sided, and I expect it to be more of a brawl with both guys kind of going at it. But, staying on the psychology angle that Din had us on, I'm really impressed by that, by the way. But, I think Uriah Hall came in with an inflated mindset. That victory against Chris Weidman, he pretended like he trained for that. I mean, I don't know if you heard some of the post-fight interviews with that, but he's like, oh, I check kicks that way, and I do that to people. Like, get out of here with that. It was a fluke, and you beat a guy you shouldn't have beaten. And I think he went into the Strickland fight thinking, I'm a killer. I really think he went in with an inflated perspective of what he's capable of. And you watched it happen in the first round. He was getting hit with that jab so hard, you just saw all the life go out of him. And I think Din's right. And I think all of a sudden it was like, I don't like this very much. I don't want to be in here with this guy, and I've got no solution for this. And I don't know what I was thinking. I just want it to be over. And once your mindset goes that way, then a lunatic like Strickland, he's just going to keep pounding you until he either kills you or they ring the bell. So
right, exactly. It was only one of those things. He's either going to kill you, or they're going to ring the bell, or the referee's going to step in.
And by the way, Strickland, best post-fight comment ever. Thank God I can do this in the UFC. Otherwise, I'd be selling crystal meth and living in a trailer. He actually said that as his initial post-fight comment.
Man, and yeah, good point on the inflated mindset, because when you beat Anderson Silva and Chris Weidman, and I think it was back-to-back fights, you probably think you own the division at that point, but you're beating a 2021 Anderson Silva and a 2021 Chris Weidman, not a 2018 Anderson Silva or 2017 Chris Weidman, stuff like that. So yeah, man, the Uriah Hall saga has been, such a roller coaster up and down. I'm jumping off at this point. I'm just tired of, at some point, potential has to meet reality, or it was just what could have been. And I watched that Ultimate Fighter show many years ago. I think it was 8 or 9 years ago when he was probably the most exciting prospect ever on the Ultimate Fighter. We've had champions come through on the Ultimate Fighter that were not knocking guys out the way he was, with spinning heel kicks and, you know, all these things that, you know, we just hadn't seen on that show before, even from future champions that came through. And just once he got, you know, to the big show, it was just never, you know, it just never clicked, at least for a long period of time, a long enough period of time to where he can make a run. So, you know, he's dabbled in the top 10, may have made number 8 at one point, stuff like that, but never really got to that top 5, spot. So I think he is one of the more disappointing prospects that's ever come through, especially with the hype, you know, because usually the UFC, they'll wait, you know, they'll wait to give a guy hype. Even, you know, like a guy like Conor McGregor, you know, came in with a lot of hype, but the UFC didn't really, you know, they gave him some easy fights. They weren't just like saying he was a future champion right away until he started winning, you know, 3-4 in a row. But Uriah Hall, I mean, people were already saying, okay, when is he going to fight Anderson Silva? You know, when he was coming off the Ultimate Fighter show. So you know, it's interesting. I'm kind of babbling a little bit about him, but I'm off the Uriah Hall train for good. I just don't think he'll ever reach his potential of what could have been.
You know, I think the primary reason why Hall was so overhyped, because I think James made a great point that the UFC is usually a little bit more careful with that stuff. I just think they were trying to sell that turd reality show to everybody because, you know, he was on the Ultimate Fighter, and I can't remember exactly what season he was on. It might like season 15, 16, something like that, and that was getting
Gastelum, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Gastelum,
that's right. Yeah, because Gastelum beat him that season. But that was when, because obviously, like the first season of the Ultimate Fighter, I don't know how many people actually like watched it live, like the new episodes the first season. But the finale went viral, and then everybody, you know, went, because then Spike TV basically for like 6 months only put Ultimate Fighter episodes on. So because I definitely watched it after the fact. I didn't watch Ultimate Fighter season 1 while it was going on. I did watch the finale fight. And then I went back and watched the reality show after the fact. But like the first 7-8 seasons of The Ultimate Fighter, I don't know if you guys felt the same way, but we're talking like between 2005 and like 2008, 2009. I used to feel like The Ultimate Fighter was must-see TV, like whenever the episodes came on. Then by the time you got to the Uriah Hall season, nobody was watching anymore. And so, and Dana White would always sell, you guys won't believe it. Oh, this guy. We have a guy on the show. You'll have to wait and see who it is. But we got a guy on this show that put literally, because Dana White will say literally about him, he is literally putting people in the hospital every episode. He put one guy in the hospital. He is literally putting everybody in the hospital. And so, like, that's when the legend started to grow. Because, like, Frank, I can remember when Dana White used to go on TV and promote the new Ultimate Fighter episodes. Dana did these cryptic comments of, oh, you guys, we have somebody on the show this year that's putting everybody in the hospital. And we're all like, ooh, I wonder who it is. And, oh, Uriah Hall, that's the guy. So this guy was legendary before anybody knew who he was.
Your MMA memory is just so outstanding. I had forgotten all that shtick coming out of Dana White. You're absolutely right. But in Dana White's defense, it made me tune in, and he was that electrifying as he was working his way through those fights. And then Kelvin Gastelum did the kind of hold him down wrestling thing. And then I thought I made an excuse for him. I thought, okay, well, once he gets into the UFC, all his coaching is going to change. Nothing about the electrifying athletic ability that I saw isn't real. He just doesn't know how to deal with wrestlers right now. Right. And I really thought that, because when Tough was big and we were watching it, that's what would happen. Some of these guys weren't getting the training they deserved. And then, you make the UFC roster, you're going to start getting real training. And I thought, this could be the next Anderson Silva. And he used to even try to mimic some of those moves with the hands down and the bobbing the head around and all that. But, it's just, I think Dean nailed it, man. I mean, the guy just doesn't want to be a fighter. Yeah. It's just something he's good at, but I don't think it's in his heart. And I think it shows. I think it shows when adversity shows up. And I think that's when it showed. And I saw it happen. I could see it in his eyes, I felt like, thanks to high definition, about the middle of the first round against Strickland, where I just felt like he just checked out.
And regardless of Uriah Hall's performance, I was still impressed with Sean Strickland. Maybe it's because the guy loves fighting so much and he's such a psycho, but he seems so relaxed in that octagon. And I've seen that with Strickland before. Like sometimes Strickland will fight like it's so casual for him. It's like the same attitude I have when I'm making a coffee, right? It's just like, oh yeah, I'm doing this now. I'm beating this guy up, whatever. Like there's no nerves whatsoever with that dude. Like it's just all pure enjoyment. Usually a few days removed from a performance like that, we will talk about, hey, I wonder who this guy's going to fight next. For Sean Strickland, we already have the answer. He's already been booked in a fight, the long-awaited return from Luke Rockhold. And Luke Rockhold seems to hate this dude like poison. So it's already making for a good pre-fight banter, right? He says, Rockhold said, they offered me Sean actually a while back, he said, and I just wasn't interested because he's a bleeping nobody, and it wasn't the fight I wanted. And it didn't make sense. No one knew him, and I didn't give two bleeps about him. And now it's like Dana White's trying to piss me off with it. So Well, so there you go. So go ahead. Before we're going to hear, I think, momentarily from Kevin Iole, but let's get into this before Kevin hops in. I don't know. Maybe just because it's been so long since we've seen Rockhold, and the versions of Rockhold we've seen in recent years have not been the vintage former middleweight champion version of Rockhold. So I don't know, James. I'm expecting Strickland to win this fight.
Yeah, and I think, to Rockhold's comment about him being a nobody, Strickland actually moved up 3 spots in the rankings to number 8 after beating Uriah Hall. So now he's in the top 10. Now he's somebody, so there's something for Luke Rockhold to gain in this fight, fighting a top 8 fighter. The thing that worries me most about Rockhold is I think he's lost his chin. And that's the one thing you just can't recover through training or through age or what have you. Just can't ever get that chin back. So we've seen it with a lot of good fighters. I think Chris Weidman has, even though he broke his leg, but before that was getting knocked out. A lot of good fighters at some point, Chuck Liddell, they just lose their chin. And even though they're still capable, Rashad Evans was another guy. Even though they're still capable of fighting and have the same skill set to win fights, they just don't have that same chin that they once had. And I think Rockhold might be in that category. Maybe the long layoff helps, but I haven't seen a fighter yet that's been able to lose their chin and sort of get it back. So that's what worries me most about Luke, not his skill set, because skill set is great.
It's a shame about his chin too, because previous to that happening, and I agree with you, but previous to that happening, I would have had him very high on the list of top pound for pound fighters, because his all around skill set was spectacular. I mean, he's one of the most well-rounded MMA fighters I'd ever seen. But you're right. He just started getting knocked out a lot. And that move to 205, that brief move to light heavyweight did not serve him well.
No, that was a really, really poor idea in hindsight.
He has the physical size, though. He has the physical size. And I've seen him out, he's a walk around, not cutting weight, 220, 225 pound guy. He's a big guy. But yeah, just when you can't handle the power, 185 on your chin, 225 or 205, not a great idea.
Guys, Kevin Iole messaged me. He's going to be hopping in shortly. So let me get into it. I'm going to ask Kevin about this as well. Watching Bellator last week. Okay, Kevin is in now. So let me table this and I'll ask Kevin about it. Let's bring in now the man himself. Does such a great job covering mixed martial arts and boxing with Yahoo Sports, one of the authorities for mixed martial arts and boxing journalism. The great Kevin Iole from Yahoo Sports is with us. And I know Kevin's just here for Frank Zaffere. He's a huge fan. He recognizes talent. He knows Frank is the star of the show.
Well, look at
Kevin,
this.
How are you?
All this time you've been talking. Frank hasn't had a chance to say a word.
Thank you, Kevin. God bless you, man. I'll try to ask a couple questions if Alex will let me, but it's a dogfight.
I allow him one question.
James has to fight to get him to shut up and get a chance to talk.
This man understands the show. Kevin, let me start with you on, we had dueling UFC versus Bellator last week. And I know folks are making a big deal about the ratings. Like, to me, it's worthless because Bellator being on Showtime, I know that Showtime's subscriber count is way down because that's just not how people are consuming television these days. ESPN is still a lot more visible on cable. So what did you think, like reflecting on both shows? Did you think that because I was more excited heading in for the Bellator card and I thought overall it delivered. What did you think?
Yeah, I was shocked by the number that Bellator got on TV, understanding that there was more people watching on streaming and whatnot, but I was still shocked that an average of 85,000 people tuned in on television on that. And, you know, the Showtime people, they're going to defend their product and point out, well, there was a lot more people watching on streaming, but I don't think you can say that there were a lot more people watching Showtime on streaming and then there weren't a lot more people on ESPN watching their streaming.
Good point.
You know, so I think that, you know, I think what happened here is Bellator is normally on Friday nights, and they decided with this fight, because it was such a big event, to go on a Saturday, and they in doing that went not only head to head against the Olympics but against UFC. And I think, you know, the UFC found out a couple of years ago they moved their pay-per-view times up 1 hour, and the sales went way down because people are creatures of habit. And as much as we in the media write about it, talk about it, say, remember the fight's on at a different time or on a different day, that message takes a while to get through. UFC quickly changed back to their normal 10 p.m. Eastern start time for the pay-per-views because the public just wasn't getting it being earlier. And I think that was a large degree what happened in this. You know, Bellator had a fantastic fight, but they went up against the UFC, they went up against the Olympics, and they went on a day they normally don't go on. And I think that was just a big mistake.
Kevin, I can't believe it got quiet, so I'm going to jump in before Alex starts talking. But Bellator, you know, I've made fun, and Coker, you know, I've made fun over the years a little bit that they were kind of running a senior league for UFC fighters that have been discarded. And this AJ Mckee, I mean, he's homegrown talent, all his fights there. But we had Din Thomas on prior to you, and he kind of compared Bellator to like basically feels like, and basically talent-wise, it's kind of still like a regional promotion. So do you think Mckee, he's got to take the next step to the UFC at some point? And how quickly do you think that'll happen? Because at this point, his star has never been brighter.
Yeah, you know, I think he has one more fight on his Bellator contract. I mean, you know, here's the thing, like the way I look at it, and I know not all of my peers look at it this way, but I think that the war has been won, right? I mean, the UFC is the major league of MMA. And if you take the top 100 fighters in the world, not all 100 are UFC fighters, but I would say 75 to 80 of them are UFC fighters. So, you know, the best fighters in the world, by and large, fight in the UFC. You know, you have some guys in Bellator that would beat a UFC guy. You have some people in one championship or what other organization you want to have. But I think, you know, the rest of them are vying for number 2 status. And, you know, really MMA is unique because when we look at this, especially in league sports, boxing is not really a league. But when we look at any sport you want to name, they cover the major leagues. You know, you do not see anybody in covering baseball that's going on about AAA baseball or the AA leagues. You know, they might talk about a prospect on those teams that are coming up, but they cover the major leagues. And I think that, you know, that's the situation Bellator finds itself in now. Coker is a great mind and has really good eye for talent. I think if they would have at the beginning of his time said, hey, you know what, we'll, you know, take a little time here to try to sign these young guys and go and build with the young guys up, they might be in a different position today. And I'll add one more thing. I wrote a column, and Bellator people got really angry at me when they signed Benson Henderson. There was 2 fighters who were on free agency at that point. Aljamain Sterling, who was a young guy just on the way up, and Benson Henderson. Henderson had been a former UFC champion, and you saw he was on a downward trajectory. Bellator signs him, and that's their big signing because they signed a former UFC champ. And I made the point, I said, you know what? The UFC didn't want Benson Henderson because he's no longer going to be able to go on to a pay-per-view and headline a pay-per-view, where they look at Aljamain Sterling, a guy on the way up, and that he's not going to headline one today, but he could headline one down the road. And I said, that's the guy Bellator should have gotten. And they got angry at that, but I think that has proven to be true. Yeah. And I think, you know, Bellator made a mistake with the Rampage Jacksons and the Tito Ortizes and the Fedors, and they're doing it again with Fedor in October. When is enough with this guy? And
don't ask Alex that question. Yeah.
I mean, it is just way off out of base with what they're doing with him. And, you know, I mean, it's like old timers games when they put some of those guys on, and I think they're paying the price for that now.
Kevin, if I can ask you about the UFC 265 main event here, I personally just don't have a feel for Cyril Gane. 3 of his last 4 fights have gone to decision, including a 5-round fight. You don't see that a lot in the heavyweight division. Why is he in this spot, and is he a legitimate threat to Francis Ngannou if he does win that interim title?
Oh, I think he's definitely a threat. I mean, there's video out there. Fernand Lopez is Cyril Gane's coach, and he was Francis Ngannou's coach up until the time he fought Stipe Miocic the first time. Then they had a falling out, and now he's coaching Cyril Gane. And he showed the video of the two of them sparring, and Francis was taking a beating in that. Cyril is a great athlete. Cyril is a guy who was a basketball player, a soccer player. He only started training MMA in 2018. And here he is in 2021 is fighting for a UFC championship. It's an interim championship. It's not the full one. He's not going to beat the champion if he gets this belt on Saturday. But still, you have to be a number one contender to get there. I think, his athleticism, his sense in the ring, a real smart fighter. He controls distance really well. I like Gane to win the fight. The thing I'm surprised about is the number. It keeps going up and up and up.
Yeah.
Last I saw, it was just under 4-1 in favor of Cyril Gane. And I thought, Derrick Lewis being the public fighter, the knockout artist who needs one knockout to become the UFC's all-time knockout leader, I thought that would sway the public to bet Lewis, but it really hasn't happened so far.
Yeah, and on that note, Kevin, you really took a topic right out of my brain there because we were talking near the start of the show. I'm looking at the betting odds. And yeah, Cyril Gane, according to the sports book we use, betus.com, minus 350 right now. The Derrick Lewis is plus 250. And you're out there in Vegas. You write a betting column. I'd love your take on this, Kevin, because even though, I'm expecting Cyril Gane to win this fight, I find a lot more value in betting Derrick Lewis here.
When I make my picks, I do a weekly video picking the main and co-main event of these shows, and I write a betting column, and I can pick other fights on there. And people who watch my videos know I really don't like to lay this, that kind of money, 350, 385, whatever it is. To me, that's a tough ask to do. But, in this particular case, I think the path to victory is big for Cyril, and it's, narrow for Derrick. Derrick's way to win this fight, he's not going to outbox him for 5 rounds. He's certainly not going to submit him. Derrick's way to win this is to land something big and finish the fight. And that is really it when you look at it. Whereas if you take the other side of it, Cyril's won fights by submission. He's athletic. He can come in and out, move around, and you could see Cyril just piling up points and winning it that way. So to my way of thinking, I would bet, fight goes the distance. That would be my bet more so than playing a side. A lot of times when I do that, right, and I put those out there, the prop bets that we use BetMGM as our sports book, the prop bets aren't released yet. So sometimes I don't have that and I don't get a chance to do it. But that, that would be my bet. Just play the fight to go the distance.
For UFC 265 this weekend, I'm not a huge fan of interim titles, but I do like this fight. But this card took a massive blow when Amanda Nunes was forced to withdraw due to COVID. How much does that hurt this card, Kevin? You look at this one and you say, yeah, that's $70 happily spent, or maybe, I don't know.
A lot of people, the hardcore people buy most of the time, right? So, you're not selling to them. You're selling to the person on the fence, more of the casual people. And that's what dictates whether the number is small, medium, or large. How many of those casual fans that you're able to convert and get to buy. And those people, you could talk all day about the good fights, Michael Chiesa versus Vicente Luque on the card. They're not that's not going to sell for them, even though that might be the best fight on the card. The fight that they're, they know names and they're looking for that. And, Pena and Amanda, Amanda being the greatest women's fighter of all time and a 2-division champion. I think that, that hurts from that standpoint. But I don't think the card takes that big of a hit if you're a hardcore fan, because it's filled with really good fights. And Amanda was probably going to win that fight, first or second round knockout. I don't think it was going to be a particularly competitive fight, and the odds were overwhelming in her favor. So, it depends on how you want to look at it, but I don't think that they're going to miss it all that much.
Kevin, looking at the heavyweight division going forward, you have the interim title fight. You have Stipe hoping for a trilogy fight at some point, and you have Jon Jones. Where does Jon Jones fit in this equation where it looks like he's at least 2 fights away because you have an interim fight, and then you're going to have Ngannou fighting the winner of that. So where do you see Jon Jones fitting in this, and when do you see him in the actual octagon?
After Cyril, after the winner of Saturday's fight, Francis.
Freudian slip.
I'm already going ahead here. After this fight happens on Saturday, then I think we'll see Francis, and the winner of that fight will fight Jon. Now, strangely, Jon said he doesn't want to fight till 2022. I've had some people that train at that gym say to me, this is the first time Jon doesn't have to worry about his weight, and so he's enjoying life and enjoying being able to not have to worry about I got to cut weight and get down. And so, he's in no hurry to, kind of push himself, but he's getting a little big. So I think Jon, sometime in the first quarter or early second quarter next year would probably be in line. Cyril, if he wins, his wife is having a baby this month. She's due on August 20th. He is praying like heck that it doesn't come while he's in the cage, and he wants to be there for it. So he said that when he gets home, if he wins the fight, he's not looking to fight right away. So that'll probably push any bout with Francis back to, late this year or even early next year. Then you can just imagine the time frame, going after that.
Well, there's nothing like having the interim champion announce, if he becomes interim champion, that he's not interested in fighting anytime soon. So what the hell are they making an interim title for? That's very funny. Do you think it's Jon Jones then next? I mean, based on that prognostication, you think Gane's going to win? He's going to take time off, so you think it would be Jones most likely to challenge?
Well, I think I do think they'll put Gane versus Ngannou up. I don't think he's going to take that long off, but if we assume he has his baby this month, take a couple months off before he goes back into training and then get going. So if he takes a couple months off, let's say he takes September, October off, he gets into training in November, when's the earliest he could fight? Really, the earliest would be January, right? I mean, so you're in that kind of time frame, but I think that they will unify the title back and do that, and then you'll see Jon Jones come out. It would not surprise me if Jones even got pushed back to International Fight Week. That in July in Las Vegas. I think the UFC wanted him to come out earlier, but if the cards fall that way, that's always one of their biggest cards of the year. And if they could put Jones versus the winner of Ngannou, whoever else for the title, I think that that would be a big main event for them.
Kevin, I got a couple more for you before we let you run. On UFC 265, which is the fight do you think is really going to deliver and take fight of the night? Because I think the three of us are in agreement that we're really looking forward to the Chiesa versus Vicente Luque fight. Do you see it the same way? What's your prediction?
Yeah, I mentioned that before as we were talking, about that Amanda Nunes question, and I said that fight. To me, that's the fight. I mean, you've got a contrasting styles, but both fighters are aggressive, right? And Vicente is not afraid to grapple with Michael, and Michael won't be afraid to stand up with Vicente. And so, to me, that's the fight that that I really like quite a bit. Kind of the low key good fight. I think might be Song Yadong and Casey Kenny. I think that's a fight that has a chance to be fun, and a lot of scrambles and a lot of stuff going on, and I think that one could be good. But I think the fight you look to and you say, hey, if I had a bet what is going to be fight of the night, that would be the one I would pick.
Kevin, you've been covering mixed martial arts since before people would have considered the sport mainstream. When you hear comments like were made by Sean Strickland that he would love nothing more than to kill someone in the ring, do you start to, like me, you get some flashbacks of like the late 90s and very early 2000s when people like John McCain were calling it human cockfighting? Like, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable with those remarks. What about you?
Oh, I mean, very stupid comments by Sean. Sean is an interesting cat. You just never know what he's going to say. Got a lot of crazy thoughts in his mind. If I had a chance to talk to Sean Strickland after having those comments, and I wasn't there last week because I was doing both shows, so I watched on television. I would have said to him, I have been ringside for 7 fighter deaths. And that is something you never, ever, ever want to see, let alone be the one that perpetrated. And I think, that's braggadocio talking going in and, trying to look at me, I'm a badass, right? And I think if he had to think about that, he wouldn't make those comments again. I think it was just, he got caught up in the heat of the moment. There's no filter. UFC doesn't put any filter on them, and whatever pops into their minds, they say. And the only filter they have is their self-imposed one. And I think it was a huge mistake on his part. And I think if he thought about it, he wouldn't say that the next time.
Hey, Kevin, you'll have to go back if you get time and watch Din Thomas's comments on Sean Strickland and some of the motivation. I think you might find it very interesting. His opponent that he battered, Uriah Hall, I was making the argument to, on Twitter. Unfortunately, I have no followers, so nobody heard the argument. But I was making the argument that Uriah Hall might be the most disappointing talent in the UFC that I can think of. What do you think about Uriah Hall and his career? He came out, he's supposed to be the next Anderson Silva, and then nothing.
It's funny you say that, because I did a Instagram live chat yesterday, and somebody asked me that exact question.
Wow.
And I was shocked by that, honestly. You think of some of the fighters who have won the show. He didn't even win the show, who have done less than him. Efrain Escudero. This is a guy that has a number of good wins. He beat Mousasi. He beat, I know it's an old Anderson Silva, but he beat Anderson Silva. I don't think you could look at Uriah and say he squeezed every last ounce of talent. He got everything out of his talent and left it all out there. I don't think you could say that, but to say he is the biggest disappointment they have, I don't. I would disagree with that. I think there's been a lot of guys that have gone through the Ultimate Fighter that they had hopes for that have done far less than what he's done.
Well, good stuff here as always. Great stuff from Kevin Iole. You want to make sure you check out his work at Yahoo Sports. He's a boxing scribe as well. And Kevin, I'm assuming most, if not all, of the fighter deaths you witnessed were those in the boxing ring. I'm just curious.
Every boxing, yeah. I had one, Alex. It was at a club show. It was at the Orleans Hotel in Las Vegas, and I'm sitting right on the apron. So we were up against the ring a lot of times where you see the commission people sit now. And there was a radio guy, host from Vegas, Dave Kogan, was sitting next to me. And the fighter took a right hand. He slid back, went between the ropes, and he fell on top of Dave and I. We caught him. And, he would have hit the floor if it wasn't for us. And we kind of pushed him underneath the rope. He took the count on the corner. And here's what was really eerie. Kenny Bayless was refereeing the fight. And Bayless got down. Now, if I was sitting in the stands, back a couple feet, you might not even have noticed this. But because we were right there and he was in our corner, Bayless is right in his face, screaming the count very loudly, like right this far from his face. 1, 2, and Martin Sanchez was the kid's name. He is looking at Kenny the entire time, and he's down. As soon as Kenny said 10, he pops up, and he was good. So he made the decision. I've had enough in this fight. I'm done. He walked out of the ring, and Joe Martinez, who now does some UFC fights, was the ring announcer that night. And Joe Martinez said, "Hey, how about a hand from Martin Sanchez?" And Martin blew kisses to the crowd, and then he turns and he remembers that Dave and I saved him from hitting the floor, and he's on the steps on the way down, and he turns and he points at Dave and I like, "Thank you," and walks away. The next morning I hear from a PR person said, "Did you know that kid that got knocked on top of you last night collapsed in the dressing room and passed away?" And I was like stunned. Wow. And it was just, and when you see that, you never forget it, right? And I'll never forget him. I've had teeth fall on my computer. I've had blood and sweat and spit and everything else. But to have the actual fighter himself and then realize that, only moments later he's going to pass away. So when Sean Strickland made those kind of comments, they hit home with me, because I've been there more than once, and it's nothing you want to see ever.
Yeah, wow, that's an unbelievable story, and I appreciate the perspective. Everyone, make sure you follow Kevin on Twitter at Kevin I. He's very engaging with his readers and viewers. He's an awesome follow on social media. Obviously, a must follow on Fight Night, because he gives you live commentary and all that good stuff. And please check out his work covering both boxing and MMA for yahoosports.com. Kevin, thank you so much for the time, and enjoy your weekend coming up.
Appreciate it, guys. Give Frank that mic back again.
Thank you, Kevin.
See you guys.
He knows what's up. He knows who the real star is. But
we've been really blessed, Alex. We've been really blessed, James, with the two guests we had on today. Really strong stuff from both guys. So
the perspective and the stories, like you're not going to get that story anywhere. That's incredible, man. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've been pretty lucky. Like mixed martial arts as a whole has been pretty lucky. There have been, unfortunately, a few deaths in some minor leagues. The UFC has not had that happen. I know it's happened more frequently in boxing. Boxing obviously has a much larger history, and they probably put on shows more overall worldwide. But man, that's crazy to think that Kevin has been ringside for 7 of those, and it's like seeing a ghost, Frank. I mean, when he talks about seeing that fighter and he helped catch him, falling out of the ring, and he ends up passing away. I'm just at a loss. Like I can't imagine, and I wish Kevin had been there to have a chat with Sean Strickland and explain, bro, this is the imagery you're conjuring up for me. You may want to think about it another way. That ain't cool.
I'm sure he got talked to. I mean, I got to tell you though, like, hearing those stories, and we've all heard those stories, not as personally as he just shared with us, or certainly not in my case, but boxing has that history, and Malcolm Gladwell's talked about this. It's counterintuitive because obviously mixed martial arts is very dangerous, but when you put that extra padding in a glove, you enable the opponent to take hundreds more punches in a course of a fight than they would otherwise be able to sustain with the kind of gloves they use in mixed martial arts. And Malcolm and others have argued that it makes boxing more dangerous. At least in MMA, sure, you're getting hit a lot, but there's a limit to what you can take. And I think it's to the benefit probably of the fighter's safety in that regard that we haven't seen that kind of stuff, certainly not in big time mixed martial arts fighting. I think the closest we ever came to it was the late Kimbo Slice and Dada 5000. I think Dada almost died, right? I think post-fight. Yeah. But I mean, they were both of them were so grossly out of shape. How that ever got licensed is a miracle. I'll never understand how
that was
happened.
Probably Bellator's low point. I mean, Frank, you talked earlier about how, like, for a while, it was like the early days of Scott Coker. Like when Scott Coker first took over Bellator, they had an existential crisis. They didn't know who they wanted to be. Like, Coker, I think, would have loved to have recreated Strikeforce, but all their talent was tied up under contract with the UFC. So he didn't have a lot of the guys like the Diaz brother, or he had Nick, not Nate, but he didn't have Nick. He didn't have Robbie Lawler. He didn't have the heavyweight guys that he had on the Strikeforce roster. So he thought maybe, hey, if I don't have all my talent from the Strikeforce days, let me get the seniors to come back and put on weird fights like Kimbo Slice versus Dada 5000. But honestly, I think Bellator has figured something out. I mean, I respect what Kevin said, that everybody's fighting for second place. I think the UFC has just gotten too massive, but I'm a lot more comfortable with who Bellator is today than who they were 3 or 4 years ago. That's for sure.
Yeah, and Strikeforce, to your point, almost already also had another advantage in that the UFC was not big on women's MMA at that point. Right. So they were able to have a Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey and all those, not being in the UFC before they, became big stars. Now the UFC has the best women and the best men. So there's really nothing left for Bellator. They just have to get second place. But to build up AJ Mckee the way that they have, homegrown, they don't do that often, but they did a really good job in that sense.
And let me get
Alex.
go ahead, Frank.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you understand who Bellator is now. You're more comfortable. I'm not sure I do understand it, unless we're thinking of them a bit as a farm league or a developmental league for the UFC.
Yeah,
I mean, maybe that's who they are. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think so. And but before we wrap it up, guys, any parting comments on UFC 265 coming up this weekend? I will say, everyone listening, if you're anywhere near South Florida, even if you have to drive a couple days over from California or something, stop by the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. This is where you want to watch the fights, my friends. 0 cover charge. Knock down those ice cold beers, the cocktails that will cure your ails. The food is so good. I love the Italian beef sandwich. Get some tater tots on the side. It literally doesn't get any better than that. The seafood is so fresh. But James and Frank, who are we expecting to be the prestigious interim UFC heavyweight champion after Saturday? Because I am I am going to stick with Cyril Gane. Kevin Iole maybe talked me out of betting a few bucks on Derrick Lewis. But either way, I was going to pick Cyril Gane to win the fight. Are we in agreement? Frank, who do you see taking that interim strap?
Derrick Lewis is knocking that fool out, and I'm betting the house on him too. I'm going to make a lot of money, and I'm going to be right.
Oh, actually, and let me read this. Sean Stanley put this in the chat. A tweet from MMA reporter Damon Martin. This is pretty funny. Derrick Lewis tonight. He was asked by a French reporter. Hold on. I want to see if I can get the context of the question real quick. Hold on. Okay. The French reporter asks Derrick Lewis what he'll do if he loses to a Frenchman in front of his hometown crowd at UFC 265, because he's fighting in his hometown of Houston. And Derrick Lewis responded, "You're going to have to excuse my French, but F you and F him." God, I hope that guy wins just after that quote.
Yeah, I actually have Gane winning, and I want to see this training video. Apparently, there's training video out there of Gane dominating Francis Ngannou in training. So, hey, that might make it more interesting to me, a future fight. But I have Gane winning.
Yeah, no doubt. So, yeah, make sure you guys check out the Quarter Deck this weekend. And by the way, make sure you sign up at betus.com. They are now the official sports book of my shows here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. And the magic of it, guys, you have the hookup. Like, I've already heard from a handful of listeners who have signed up. I know Frank is going to sign up. I'm going to get Sean Stanley working behind the scenes and James to sign up. I made my deposit, guys, 48 hours ago, and I'm still playing with free play money. It's amazing. So when you sign up at betus.com, America's favorite sports book, use our code 5RSN125. That's 5RSN125. And you get a 125% sign-up bonus. For example, I deposited $150 on Tuesday, and I get automatically $187.50 in free play money. I'm still making bets off that free play money, man. It's going to be fantastic. So make sure you sign up at BetUS. Another cool thing about BetUS is you get a personal customer service rep. Carla is my rep, and anytime I have questions to ask her about I'm very high maintenance when it comes to a client. Like you have your own like personal assistant. Like it's like being a VIP in Vegas. It's fantastic. So sign up at BetUS with our code 5RSN125, betus.com. We will talk to you guys again next Thursday. We'll certainly be recapping UFC 265. I'll tell you what a great time I had out at the Quarter Deck and how many beers I drank and how many buffalo shrimp that I ate. For James and for Frank and for Sean Stanley in the back, huge shout out. We'll talk to you guys next Thursday, 6 p.m. right here on 5 Rounds on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.